I'm hitting start.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a webinar with National Center for Grow Your Own and our good friends at the Nebraska Department of Education, the Maryland State Department of Education, the Arizona Department of Education, and the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I had the privilege of presenting alongside leaders from those four organizations at our national convening that's co-hosted with NASDAQ just a couple weeks ago in New Orleans. And this is always a fun and hot topic as folks are looking to get information. So we figured we'd offer it as a webinar. Please feel free to submit questions into the chat. We believe we're going to have plenty of time to address questions at the end. And also, I'll just ask for one of my colleagues, Ben or Ashley, to just we have two upcoming webinars as well in the month of March. One is about how to get more men into teaching. That was also one we hosted in New Orleans at our convening. And so if you're interested in attending that, there will be a link that is provided in the chat, as well as a webinar on with different state apprenticeship agency directors and what lessons we can learn from other occupations when it comes to mentoring that would apply to teacher registered apprenticeships. But back to our regular scheduled programming and show me the money, how to leverage federal, state, and district funding to ensure financial sustainability of your teacher apprenticeship program. Next slide. And so, if you even have one teacher vacancy in your district, we like to start there. And why do we start with teacher vacancies? Well, the data in this space is pretty interesting and telling. And so, this slide here from IES, what I thought was interesting, it's not about how many districts. When I first saw it and I didn't really read it, it looked like how many districts have vacancies. No, 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 no. This is about what percentage of schools reported difficulty in even filling a teacher vacancy position. And although it's going down over the years, which is promising, it's still pretty high to say the least. And so it can be difficult, as we know. We've heard countless stories of, 20 years ago, I used to have 50 or 100 applications for every opening. Now I'm lucky to, even get one or two applications for a teacher vacancy that I may have. And so, why is this relevant as we move forward? So I'm a former teacher, I'm a former principal, and I led talent in a school district where I was a principal, Detroit Public Schools. And then my last government job, I had the honor of serving as chief of human capital for the Tennessee Department of Education. And so putting my district lens on, when you have teacher positions, you budget usually at average teacher salary costs, is how you usually approach that work. And so the average teacher salary in America is $67,000. Well, that doesn't even include your fringe benefits like healthcare, retirement, and other things that go into that. So I was an English teacher. Math wasn't my forte necessarily. And so if you work with me here, if we go from 67, we round up to $70,000, which again is significantly less because fringe benefits are usually 25 to 30% of a teacher's salary. So this is on the low end. So 70,000. And if you have a long-term sub covering for that class where there's a vacancy, a long-term sub typically costs you 25 to $30,000 a year. So if it's 30,000 for the sub, but you've budgeted at $70,000, Well, there's $40,000 worth of savings in this case. And so, what could we possibly do with that $40,000 in savings? On the next slide. So, one way to look at it is I could use that $40,000 and hire a paraprofessional. Paraprofessionals typically make $18,000 to $24,000 a year. We budgeted at 30 because of fringe benefits. And I could give that para $10,000 or a different para in the school $10,000 towards tuition support to help towards finishing their degree. Or I could use that savings and divide it up against three different paras. And so they each could get $13,000 each to go towards tuition support. The key being, how do we avoid being in the same place where we have these vacancies? How can I avoid having that vacancy a year from now for the next school year? But different options there with that savings. The other way to look at this, and this is something we had in Tennessee, we had certain mandatory class sizes that could were in place, and so we did something called class size waivers. And so imagine you have five second grade classrooms, and it's meant to be a 20 student to one teacher ratio. So if you look at the top of this slide, there's five classrooms needing five teachers, but you're struggling to fill that fifth classroom. You can't find a teacher for that position. What do you do? Well, one option could be that you collapse those five classrooms into four. You take that fifth classroom and you redistribute the students. So now it's four classrooms with 25 kids and thus four teachers. And in the past, when I was in Tennessee, these class size waiver requests were rubber stamped. We just, we knew there were teacher shortages. So, okay, we understand you have to redistribute the students to be able to make this work. That's how it had been. But instead, we said, hey, before we sign off on this, show me how you're going to use the savings. What are you going to do with that teacher salary that you collapsed? How are you going to use that money? And so, if it's $70,000 that you have now because of a collapsed classroom, well, you have four licensed teachers, as you see, but then that 70 could be used to pay to hire another para. Frankly, it could be hired to use two paras, and those two paras or the one para could help those four teachers. And if you just hired one para at 30,000, well, then you'd have 40,000 left to pay for four paras at 10,000 each towards their tuition. Or again, you could hire two paras and that would cost you about 60K and you have 10,000 left over to go to one of them to towards their degree. And so as we look to the next slide, you might be wondering, well, David, this sounds interesting. You're talking about $40,000 in savings. You're talking about $70,000 in savings. Where does that money go? And so often and I think a lot of us may have these experiences that we deal with, a chief financial officer, the CFO, and we got to help turn him or her from a CF no into a CF yes. Because that $40,000 in savings or that $70,000 in savings, it actually, like the dirty little secret in education, is that that money is usually used by the CFO to patch up overages in other departments like transportation or facilities or curriculum, whatever it may be. Our big push is that that money must stay in the human capital department because the irony here is that if you were magically to find certified teachers that you wanted to hire, well, you'd have to hire you would need that money to be able to hire them and bring them into the slots. And so it's almost as if, and it's not almost, it actually is in a lot of places. Districts actually almost rely on having teacher vacancies so that they can use that savings to patch up these overages again in other departments. And instead, we want to make sure that that money stays in human capital and it's reinvested into your people because the most important thing of all we do in this space is to ensure every child has not only the teacher they need but deserve. So we got to make sure, like, frankly, in my opinion, facilities and transportation and school nutrition, they need to have their own balanced budget. They shouldn't be relying on human capital to cover their overages. And instead, our human capital leaders, many of you that are on this call and many folks that will be presenting today, they need you need to be able to use that money again to invest in your people for grow your own or teacher apprenticeship type pathways. And so next. And so if we were to scale this out, we started with just one vacancy. So in this slide, you'll see whether you have five vacancies or 20 or 50 or God forbid 100, but my first day in Detroit Public Schools, I had 417 teacher vacancies, and that was after the 4th of July. So I didn't have a lot of time to before the school year started. But if you have even five teacher vacancies, if you look at that first row with a District A, five times that $70,000 an average teacher salary comes out to 350K. Well, if subs are 30K, five subs at 30K is 150K. So the point being, in the last column, you see you have $200,000 left over to invest in your people. And so if we were to do District C at 50 vacancies, the same concept, 50 times 70,000 is 3.5 million. And yet the cost to fill those 50 vacancies with long-term subs would be approximately 1.5 million. Now you have $2 million to leverage. So whether you have 200K, 800K, which would be the budget remaining on 20 vacancies, 2 million or 4 million, that's significant amount of dollars that a district can use to negotiate with university partners for cohorts for their paraprofessionals or other individuals to be able to become a teacher. And so when we talk about negotiating with universities, one of the big lessons that we've learned in our time is that if I was to give $10,000 to a para and they went to a university by themselves, that university may say, "Oh, that's cute, but you need to times this by five, or you're missing a zero," as we've heard in some cases. But when you're able to group, like if you have that $200,000 and you were able to have 20 people at $10,000 a pop, that's a cohort now. That's 20 people, 10,000 bucks pop. No one's gonna shy away from a $200,000 check. So when a state or a district is able to bundle together the cohort of folks, that's a big, big difference. And it allows you to leverage economies of scale. In our experience working with universities, we've talked to, we originally always started with the dean of the School of Ed. And they would say, "David, I'm not in control of tuition." And they're correct. They're not. It doesn't mean they can't ask, though. But with that said, the lessons learned for us, where we started going to the provost or the president, even in some cases of universities, and we would say, "Wouldn't you rather have uh, instead of the current full tuition you have for 10 people, what about getting 40 students, but for half of the tuition?" And they got it every time. They're like, "Yeah, if I'm already running a program and I have these empty seats, it doesn't hurt me to have other folks come in at a discount because I'm already running my program anyway. I'm already paying the professors, I'm already paying for facilities and electricity bill. And imagine it's an online class or it's a Zoom webinar. It doesn't cost us any more dollars to have 150 attendees on this webinar than it does 175. I'm already paying the fee to have our Zoom license and run this webinar. And so once we started talking like that with the provost, they were just like, "Yeah." And the other thing too is enrollment's down nationally in teacher prep programs. So they need us just as much as we need them. And so you have a lot of power to negotiate on price in this case. But on the next slide, it goes beyond just price. Now, I know that that's always my bias, and I'm always pushing in a lot of you. We have a really, really good crowd here because funding is a big deal. And how do we make these programs work and how do we make them sustainable? And I always love when people are actually looking to expand because they see the fruits of their labor thus far. But it goes beyond money. Again, the most important thing we do in this work is ensuring that every child has not only the teacher they need but deserve. And so those same lessons we can learn on leveraging economies of scale, they can apply to the programmatic aspects of this work. And so, it's the evil version of the golden rule. It's from movie Aladdin. I think it's Jafar says it, but whoever has the gold makes the rules. And so if you have 200,000 or 800,000, or again, even if you just have that original 40,000 or 70,000 from having a teacher vacancy, that's a lot of money that you can use to negotiate with universities. And so it can also be, please show me how you're preparing folks in high quality instructional materials, the science of reading, or what other priorities you may have as a state education agency or a local education agency. I mean, I see a lot of folks talking now about how are you preparing folks on, AI in the classroom, and these things always evolve. And so whatever matters to, again, our partners in this case in Nebraska and Massachusetts and Maryland and Arizona, they can say these are the values and priorities that matter and we're prioritizing in our state. Show me how you can help us achieve these goals. We have the money, we have the people. Help me help you. And one of the reasons why we're always going to be so passionate about this is because it's never made sense to pay tuition to a university to provide free labor to a school district. And we call that the student teaching model. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's why I'm so proud to be on this webinar with these four states who are doing exceptional work to remove those financial barriers for aspiring educators. Um, Next slide, please. And so, before I get into this slide, I'd be remiss if I just didn't share that, this work's deeply personal for me because my mom was my school cafeteria worker. And so she also taught Sunday school and vacation Bible school for over 2 decades. She was not able to afford to go to college. Um, and yet, I'm also the son of a West Point alum. And so my father had the ability to go to college for free for committing to the military. And so if we believe that teaching and military are both forms of public service, where is the equivalent of a GI Bill for those who want to be a teacher? And so when we think about these individuals who want to be a teacher, we're always recommending to start with the paraprofessional role. Because frankly, what more loyalty do you need from someone who's willing to work in a school for 18 to $24,000 a year? They literally shadow and work in the classroom, following the teacher day in and day out, and they're still saying, I want this job. I want to become a teacher. They know what they're signing up for. They are loyal. They're like it's the best position and people to leverage. At the same time, I also think it's really important to leverage the current teachers you have in the school. They know who they want their future coworker to be. Teachers are sick and tired of giving up their prep period to cover for the emergency hire teacher or the substitute teacher or whoever it may be. They want every kid to not only have a high quality teacher, so they know which paras can cut it or not. And also, when I talk about people like my mom, a school cafeteria worker, or in cases, bus drivers or parents or guardians or city year core members, you name it. We all we're very pro having all those people be able to become a teacher as well. But when they go through your program, we're just saying leverage that paraprofessional role. It is essential that they get that minimum of 1 year under a mentor teacher who is the teacher of record. And so, why we do not recommend using the substitute teacher position. Again, you could recruit a substitute teacher. We're just saying move them into a paraprofessional role. But we've heard of unfortunately a few programs that have substitute teachers as their registered apprenticeship, and that's not a true registered apprenticeship. An apprentice is somebody learning to do the job, not doing the job on day one. And a substitute teacher is a default teacher of record. I started my career as a substitute teacher. You don't have anyone checking in on you. You do not have a mentor, to say the least, in that space. Next slide. And so when you think about, okay, apprenticeship sounds great, but what's something that I can do today? And we already talked about the fully funded vacant positions, but you can also leverage Title II funds, Title III, IDEA, state general funds, Perkins 5. You can leverage available funding at the high school level. And what I mean by that is dual credit, dual enrollment, early college. But some things I just want to hit on with the IDA and Title III is that in both of those cases, if we are in Tennessee, when we did this at the time, we required folks to be dual endorsed in either special ed or ESL. So now I could pay for up to 50% of the program with IDA funds if I required special ed endorsement, or up to 50% with Title III funds if I required ESL endorsement. You could do just a straight special ed and pay for 100% of it with IDA funds. Just last week, the U.S. Department of Ed put out a letter talking about how you can leverage Title II and in select cases Title I funds to do teacher apprenticeships. And that's something that I know some folks have known, but it was good to hear it as a reminder, and how it can also apply to principal and now the new lead teacher registered apprenticeships. And so we're big pushers on using um, any funds you're able to get solely for tuition, books, and fees, not for salaries, because frankly, if you have teacher vacancies, you almost certainly have paraprofessional vacancies. So now you can recruit people and say, come and work in our district for 1, 2, or 4 years, and we'll pay for you to become a teacher. Never pay market rate tuition, leverage your economies of scale to negotiate with university partners, and be intentional with your high school programs. I'm a huge, huge fan of Educators Rising and other programs like Teacher Cadets, or in Tennessee, it's called Teaching as a Pathway. It's a CTE program. It's really great to get kids excited about becoming a teacher, but we can't have the leaky pipeline by taking the thoughts and prayers approach. Thoughts and prayers that they'll magically register to college, that they'll figure out, that they won't change their major, that they'll be able to pay tuition to the university to work for free for the school district, be a student teaching at the end. Let's make sure that when we get kids excited about teaching, we have that clear articulated pathway for them to see through so that we don't lose them and we keep them. Just another minor point, a lot of places may have tuition reimbursement programs. We would encourage you to pool those funds along with the funds on the left side of the screen as a tuition investment to run your competitive grants for registered apprenticeship or grow your own programs. Next slide. And so potential funding sources beyond the ones we talked about, state and federal grants, reoccurring state legislative funds, state and federal workforce development funds, specifically touching on registered apprenticeship. And that's why part of the reason we have all these funds is referenced is because you're going to hear from these leading states about how they're leveraging different ones of these. And then we put philanthropy on there because I kind of feel like you have to, even though it's always the one that I always let out a pretty big sigh whenever I see it on anyone's presentation, including ours, because it's like, cool, like we would love philanthropy too. Nice for you. We have not done the best in being able to leverage philanthropy, and I know it's kind of a crapshoot. But the other ones I think are more in your locus of control, and you're going to hear from state leaders on how they've tapped into those funds. Next. And so, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our first state, Jessica, with the Nebraska Department of Education. Jessica, thank you so much for being here, and please feel free to take it away.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. Good morning. My name is Jessica Jaworski. I work for the Nebraska Department of Education as a Strategic Initiatives Grant Specialist. I'm here today to talk about our federal SAFE grant. So we were awarded $4.5 million, worked on that grant application in partnership with NCGYO after we registered teacher apprenticeship as an occupation in the state of Nebraska in 2024. Does that sound right, Ben? The SAFE money allowed us to both grow our capacity as a team. We hired 3 folks, and then we're able to competitively award dollars to our education preparation providers to grow our apprenticeship team. So we piloted teacher apprenticeships with 3 colleges in our state. sort of a geographic representation, each of those working with one district to serve 12 apprentices. And we have used this $4.5 million to scale from those 12 apprentices to over 200. Sort of our impact thing spend 2024 sounds right. So we went from 12 to almost 200 apprentices with the help of this federal dollars. From those first 3 education preparation providers, we now have 8. Our state has 16, so we're halfway there. And then from those 3 initial school systems, we now support more than 50, both public and non-public. We've also leveraged some of our statewide partners as part of this federal dollars. So we have other state agencies, community colleges, and have really been able to promote registered apprenticeships beyond just the teaching profession. And that especially has been in partnership with Governor Jim Pillen and the Nebraska Department of Labor. We also made a note there, impact from these federal dollars. As we talk about those 200 folks that will be teachers by the end of the federal period of performance, over 68% of those have a touch on our special education folks in the state. So either early childhood inclusion or special education as a concentration. And then future plans. We are always looking for sustainable measures. The grant does conclude next year. So we're exploring aligned and adjacent pathways, such as the CDA for our early childhood development folks, other opportunities for para-educators, potentially in high school, and principal apprenticeships. We are also looking at sustainability through partnerships, title funds, and driving the cost down with these additional rounds of competitive funding. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to talk today about federal funding, and I want to pass it on to Kelly from Maryland to chat about her funding as well.
Thank you so much. So Maryland is in a really exciting place right now. We have $19.4 million of state funding that has been provided to us from our legislature. We have an extremely supportive governor, state superintendent, and legislature right now. So how do we achieve this? It certainly didn't happen overnight. It actually, our journey started 2 legislative sessions ago. And I will say, just for some additional context, Maryland is a unionized state. Our teachers union is extremely influential. And really, they are the ones that first approached the legislature in Maryland and said, we need to do this. We need to have a Grow Your Own grant program in statute. And they worked collaboratively with the Department of Education, the governor's office, and they did have a statute developed. Unfortunately, it was not funded at all. Last year's legislative session rolled around, and we took the opportunity to really double down in our collaboration. And we brought on the Department of Labor, we brought on the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and really as a united front. We worked with the governor's office and the legislature, and we expanded the statutory program significantly, and the funding also was expanded significantly and fully funded. So that is how we ended up with our 19.4 million. We're currently, we have an application, our first application window is open for these funds. It's closing in about 3 weeks. So we're very, very excited to see all of the great work throughout the state and how it's going to be implemented moving forward. And our goal really is to have a debt-free pathway. We are prioritizing through this grant program all of the Grow Your Own programs that strategically recruit males into the profession, those that strategically recruit special educators and other shortage areas. And also we're braiding this and using it as an opportunity. We have new induction regulations. And of course, you cannot talk about recruitment without talking about retention. So really prioritizing those proposals that are coming in that provide that support during the induction period that we're looking for. So for future plans, this is a multi-year strategy. It's a 4-year grant period. We understand it takes time to focus on our ESPs and get them through the bachelor's degree in the licensure program. So we are, we're just looking year to year. Our goal is to stabilize the workforce, decrease the shortage, and at the same time develop a pipeline that is self-sustaining, so that we are not continuously hiring those provisionally licensed educators. And with that, I will turn it over to, I believe Arizona is up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. My name is Grant Lipinski from the Arizona Department of Education in Arizona, joined by my counterpart, Ryan Salcido, who I'll let jump on and introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. My name is Ryan Salcido, and we'll talk just a minute, a little bit more in our program, but go ahead, take it away, Grant.
Yeah, so on our journey, we are utilizing regional county workforce development funds, and we sort of came across this on our journey just by us getting the word out that we are starting this program up. So we started about a year and a half ago, really putting forth the effort towards getting registered. We got registered officially about a year ago with the hope of having 4 pilot partners. And we had no kind of guaranteed funding for that pilot program. We were just going to utilize, leverage our community college system and some other programs we have statewide to cover the cost of tuition at least. And our connections that we made with the Department of Economic Security led us to communications with Maricopa County, who had some remaining ARPA funds, and offered us $1.5 million to support up to 100 apprentices. So really, the message behind that, I would say, is just communicate, communicate, communicate. Talk to anyone that'll listen about the apprenticeship program. And even though you're hearing a lot of no's, it just takes one yes to kind of get things rolling and off the ground. So that is helping us get our pilot up and running to a greater extent than Ryan and I ever really thought. Ryan, I'll let you talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, so those funds specifically come from the county workforce board, and in Arizona we have, not too many of them. I think we have like 13 of them. Is that right, Grant? 15, somewhere in there. So I know a lot of you have probably, 10 times that in some of your states. So consider reaching out to those workforce boards. They surprisingly, a lot of them have contacts that are already within your EPPs, probably. They may be professors or things like that in those universities and are also sitting. So highly advise trying to make those contacts and the connections. We had the fortune to sort of sit in and talk with all of them about a couple months ago and just sort of, again, advertise the program. We've also done we also have a information request form on our website, or apprenticeship website here at the department. And that has also allowed us to get a lot of information out to the community and sort of, blast that across the state. We've had a lot of interest for that. So right now we're serving Maricopa County, which we look to hopefully invest in the entire state. So going forward, we have an ask in for this legislative session to to make it part of just who we are here in Arizona and making sure that we're funding it going forward. But that's kind of where we are, and hoping to where we go. We're currently sitting around, I think by the end of the school year, we'll have around 50 apprentices in this pilot year, which is great, especially for just being localized to the Phoenix area. And then the goal is to hopefully start branching out to those rural communities in Arizona where they really absolutely need apprenticeship. So that's kind of where we are and where we're going. So from there, we'll pass it on to Massachusetts.
Thank you both. My name is Claire Abbott. I'm the director of the Office of Educator Effectiveness at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in Massachusetts. And we are about 2 years into our registered teacher apprenticeship program. We established the occupation actually in partnership with the National Center for Grow Your Own about 2 years ago, and started putting together a grant program to incentivize our first cohort of districts and educator preparation providers to come on board. We've, for the last year and then going into this coming year, we've been able to budget about $2.5 million worth of Title I and state turnaround school funding toward this initiative. And that's allowed us to really advance the priorities that we established for registered teacher apprenticeship programs in Massachusetts, which include diversifying the profession, really zeroing in on our hardest to staff roles, and improving the quality of our educator preparation process for educators. So these two funding sources allowed us to really focus in on districts and communities that were rapidly diversifying from a demographic standpoint, and to also prioritize what we identified as our hardest to staff positions, which were special education, English as a second language, secondary STEM, and early childhood. So I can actually say at this point, we have I think we're upwards of 40 apprentices right now currently in the program, and every single one of them fall into the special education, ESL, or early childhood licensure route. So we really leveraged our state priority area of workforce diversity and pipeline development to advance this initiative. We have a really supportive commissioner, secretary of education, and governor. So what that's allowed us to do is continue these funding sources pretty consistently, and also use those funding sources to establish an office within the agency. So we have 2.5 FTEs dedicated toward this program, and to explore what scaling will look like in years 3 and 4. We're also hoping that our legislature is as excited about this as we are. There is currently a bill that's pending that would provide some additional funding for registered teacher apprenticeship programs in Massachusetts. So we're hoping this $2.5 million number will increase. But in the meantime, I think David mentioned some other funding sources in his presentation. We are looking to leverage both Title III and IDEA funds, given the priority areas of English as a second language and special education in the state. The last thing I'll just say in terms of future plans, right now we have 7 districts that are registered teacher apprenticeship providers, along with their partner educator preparation providers. We are hoping to build a more articulated pathway from high school or early college up into registered teacher apprenticeship programs. So in Massachusetts, we have free community college. So one of our areas of focus going forward is building a more co-op sort of model for multiple districts to leverage that high school to college pathway, leverage associate's degree tracks into 4-year universities, and really try to keep the costs down by leveraging those other financial opportunities here in Massachusetts, so that we're really providing a baccalaureate pathway into teaching that is frankly at no cost. I think I'll stop there, but I will just note there, I saw several questions about paras and other things. I'm happy to talk about how we approach those questions as well, since all of our apprentices are full-time instructional paras here in Massachusetts as well. But I'll turn it over to David and see where he wants to take the rest of the webinar.
Great, Claire. Thank you. And folks, please continue to submit questions in the chat. If we want to stop sharing the screen, and all of our panelists can put their camera on and come off mute. Claire, I am going to come to you on that question. But first, I just want to say, so, that one of the last slides I had was different funding sources. And sure enough, you hear Nebraska federal funding, but specifically U.S. Department of Labor, Maryland state funding that they were able to get through the legislative. You have in Arizona tackling that regional workforce funding. And then with Claire, you have federal and state funding, the federal funding being education dollars, and then state funding as well. And so there's no right or wrong way. It's all about hustling and blending and braiding and figuring out. In my initial presentation, I talked about leveraging your locus of control from a district lens. Not every district is blessed to work in or be located in, Arizona or Nebraska or Maryland or Massachusetts. And so sometimes I kind of take the stance of the Lord helps those who helps themselves. When we were in Tennessee, a district did this work on their own to start, and it came to our attention. And then we were like, oh, wow, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. How can we help amplify it? And so I know these state leaders are always looking for innovation from districts, and they also want to help their districts innovate as much as they can. So Claire, I'm going to actually just read off that question. I know I have some thoughts, but I'll go to you first, but let me read it for the good of the order. Um, it says, most paras are funded by special education to provide services legally required because the student they're serving has a disability. To free up a progressive work experience aligned with an apprenticeship, the paras need to be able to work and obtain on the job learning hours, so that the paras can be free to work in a gen ed setting. This requires additional positions. Should this cost be the LEA's responsibility? I'll go to you first, and then if anybody else has thoughts, and I have some myself. But Claire,
So I might be able to help, and I might not be able to help. This is an issue that all of our districts are tackling in Massachusetts. So it's a great question because it's a real strategic problem, not problem, or strategic dilemma to consider when you're providing this pipeline to paraprofessionals. So our programs are typically 2 to 3 years in length. And what we are doing is we are actively counseling districts to be very intentional when they hire an individual into a para role who's a registered teacher apprentice, to think about that 2 year trajectory of their employment. The first year can be squarely in that para role. It could even be in a sub-separate setting, but they have to be thoughtful as that apprentice progresses through their term to ensure that that apprentice has access to a gen ed setting for the appropriate number of hours for on the job training that they need for the license in Massachusetts. So, but it depends again whether it's a 2 or 3 year term. They'll have to be thoughtful about that, but eventually that pair is going to have to be able to put X number of hours in a gen ed setting and X number of hours in a sub-separate setting. Districts are figuring it out, and it doesn't necessarily mean hiring somebody new. It usually means just being really thoughtful about moving certain people into classrooms while other people's transition out. The last thing I'll just say about it is that we did require that registered teacher apprentices not be one-to-one paras. So that is a rule that we strongly discourage because it becomes way too difficult for that individual to get the experience in small group settings, full classroom responsibility, and so forth. So that's how we've approached the para role.
yeah, thank you, Claire. Anyone else have anything to add on that one? All right, Claire, I don't really have much to add. I think your point about in your case, the one-to-one para was not eligible. That's where our advice kind of comes in. We say, hey, the one-to-one could maybe work, but only if it's a special education registered apprenticeship. And even then, the most important thing is ensuring the student you have gets the legally mandated services from the IEP. But usually we're leveraging teaching assistant and other gen ed para type roles, for this space. But yeah, that's where that comes from in this work. All right. Another question that we got was, is anybody doing this for folks who already have a bachelor's degree? So whether it's a career changer or it could be a pair that has a bachelor's, or military, whoever it may be. Does anybody have programs that allow for a post-bac teaching registered apprenticeship?
Yeah, so one of our employer partners in Arizona is running a fairly successful post-bac program, and they had already existed as a teacher residency program, and they were looking to transition to the apprenticeship model because one of their grants had kind of run out with the change in administration, and they were looking for our support, and we were looking to run a
Hmm.
post-bac program. So it worked out pretty perfectly. In Arizona, we're fortunate we have a program called Arizona Teachers Academy, where if a student is a post-bac student who is looking to become a teacher in the state, they need to stay in the state for, at the time I did it, 2 years, and their tuition would be covered for that commitment of service. So
Nice.
that's how the tuition is covered for those apprentices. And then through our grant funding through the county, we were able to provide those supplemental funds, those other support
Mhm.
funds, and that program is filled with career switchers, really young individuals who may have just finished an undergrad and are just kind of looking to try something different, veterans,
Mhm.
um, a whole mix of people.
Yeah, yeah. Claire, I think I saw you shaking your head. Was there anything you wanted to add on post-bac in Massachusetts?
I just, two of our 7 districts are also post-bac,
There you go.
um, and similar to what Grant just described. Yeah. The only thing about post-bac programs in Massachusetts is that we don't allow teachers of record to be registered teacher apprenticeships, and that can be
Mhm.
a deal breaker for some districts that want to put a provisionally licensed teacher in a classroom.
Mhm.
But two of our 7 districts are
Yeah,
designed around
yeah.
that pathway.
Great. Kelly in Maryland, how are you approaching that with your current grant opportunity?
The post-baccalaureate option.
Yep.
Yeah, so there are no parameters. So
Mhm.
we may very well receive proposals. In fact, I know that we'll receive at least one proposal because they've shared it with us, that is focusing on the post-bac. And they're actually focusing on paras that have a bachelor's degree. So I don't know how many they're going to be able to recruit, but I do know that that is their focus. So we
Mhm.
shall see.
Great. And Jessica, do you want to share a little bit about our mutual friend Noah, or maybe some of the others that you might more closely know back in
Yeah,
Lincoln, Nebraska?
we have some incredible paras in our state, and I think it does a pretty big disservice to just assume none of them have bachelor's degrees, right? We have folks coming into this profession from all over. The other thing about apprentices is that apprenticeships really target the non-traditional student. So assuming someone has a bachelor's and is ready for their career isn't always how it works. I'm excited to hear Noah talk again at your webinar about bringing more men into teaching. Noah Stefersky is an apprentice in Nebraska who was a provisionally licensed teacher and went back through the apprenticeship program to become better prepared to support his future students. So we're really excited to lift his voice up as we talk about supporting folks with all kinds of different backgrounds. We've been fortunate enough to do 4. We're on our 4th competitive round of funding out to education preparation providers in Nebraska. And every round we've had folks wanting to do a post-bac program.
Yep, yep. It's all about like you could teach someone's, science, you can teach someone Spanish. You can't teach someone to have a heart for kids. So, as you see with these states, folks, like they want districts to be able to select someone who could be 15, 25, 35, 45, 55, 65-year old, because you can't you just can't teach someone to have a heart for kids. That's what I always think about my mom. I think about people like Noah who had a degree in provisional license teacher and yet still said, I could be better by getting an apprenticeship experience. Like who does that? Like it's just those are the kind of people that you want in front of kids. I also would just push, not that this has come from any question, but there's something that made me think of it. Like I've had so many people too be like, oh, like grow your own or apprenticeship. Like they're becoming elementary teachers, right? Like they can't be high school math teachers, they can't be high school science, and it's implied that individuals are not smart enough. And I want to assure you that it is not a matter of skill, will, or intelligence. It is almost always financial barriers that prevent these individuals from being able to become a teacher. And so that's my PSA for the day. Claire, you shared in your slide about how one of the priorities in the Commonwealth is to get more teachers that look like the students in your states. Kelly, I know in Maryland, there's a desire from the governor to how do we get more men into teaching. I'm curious, when it comes to values and priorities, whether, in the programmatic lens, does anybody, whether it's Massachusetts or Maryland, share more about that? Or does Nebraska or Arizona have anything that you're focusing on? I gave those examples of like science of reading, AI, HQIM. I'd be curious to hear. I always think you can learn so much from different folks. I'm like, oh, I didn't think I could do that in this space. Does anybody have anything that they'd care to share in this state priorities, I guess you could say?
I I can speak just very briefly about it. So when we talk about wanting to build a workforce that mirrors the demographics of its local community, those demographics can be widely different. We have, even in the 7 districts that we're working with right now, one of our districts is Martha's Vineyard, and another one of our districts is Everett. And those demographics are extraordinarily different from one another. But within those local communities, it is really valuable for them to be cultivating and recruiting from the families and the students within those homes, those local places. So when we talk about wanting to diversify our profession, we're really talking about it at a local level to help districts build an educator workforce that reflects the communities that they're embedded in, because we know from research that that matters a lot, whether it's race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, religion. We don't define it, but we do ask when a district submits their application for grant funding that they, with data, tell us how they want to cultivate an educator workforce within their community that reflects the students and the families that they're serving.
Yeah. I'll just I'll add to that, but does anybody else have anything they'd like to share from their respective state? I'll just add, Claire, beyond all the benefits you shared, it's also like just recruitment 101. Like, if any state or any district has vacancies and they look at their current teacher workforce and they see that the students' demographics are different from that, then clearly there's an audience you're not tapping into. Like that, I just, my partner, she happens to work in marketing, and I just learned so much from, like, different advertisements and where the different groups you're trying to hit. And oh, we don't have a lot of folks in this space. That's just recruitment 101. We should be exploring, looking under every, rock, pebble, whatever it is, to find individuals who have a heart for kids. And so I think,
And from a
oh, go ahead.
financial standpoint, you're talking about your local community. You're reducing transportation costs. You're reducing childcare costs. So it's just
Hmm.
financially, they're more likely to stay if they are
Yep.
employed and commit and complete an educator preparation program that's within 20 miles of where they teach. So all of this is wrapped up into the economics of a strong recruitment
Yeah.
and retention model.
People become taxpayers, or they get increase in wages, when you go from the para salary to eventually becoming a teacher. That's huge. That's economic development. So yeah, thank you, Claire. Um, all right. For those who are exploring or working in the special education registered apprenticeships, is anybody currently or exploring tapping into IDA funds? Or are you aware of any districts in under your state that are tapping into IDA funds? And we might as well just leverage Title III for ESL pathways as well. Is anybody exploring the use of those two funding sources based on a question we received?
Yeah, I don't have any specific examples to share from Nebraska, but that's currently part of our sustainability talks.
Hmm. Great, great. One of the questions that we got in the beginning that we hadn't come to yet was that an individual sees the argument in leveraging vacancies, and also sees the argument in trying to drive down costs from universities. But, kind of at what point, can districts get help from the state or federal government? To be fair, that question was sent before the states presented. And so one of the reasons why we do this webinar in the way we do is because it's really important, I think, for us to say, look, like, if you take nothing out of this, what is in your locus of control? Like, you're not going to get a registered apprenticeship set up tomorrow morning. It doesn't work like that. It does take time. We can help if you need that. but it's like, what can you do within your locus of control first? Because you may, when you hear these states, I don't want you to get, I do actually want you to get jealous because then hopefully you tell your state, hey, why aren't we doing this? Can we do this? You know, they get this help from Maryland, this help from Arizona, Massachusetts, Nebraska. But I also don't want to leave anyone deflated and thinking, just like I do with philanthropy, must be nice if I had philanthropy. No, the Lord helps those who help themselves. And so that's why we frame this webinar in that way, while also giving you states that are tapping into different funding sources. Because again, there's no, it's the Jackson Pollock approach. You got to throw different things against the wall to make your own masterpiece in this space. Um, all right. Um, Sorry, I'm just trying to check. Oh, this is a great question, and it comes from one of the states on here. I'm curious to hear if anybody can share what are you hearing from your apprentices, and I'd also add your districts, but if you can center it about the apprentices regarding areas of strength or areas of growth for the programs that they're in. This individual specifically says they're just interested in hearing about apprentices' day-to-day experiences. Does anybody have any anecdotes or examples they can share of the feedback they're getting from their apprentices? And then if not, go one level up to district partners.
Yeah, I can share. We are hearing back from folks in the field that it's a lot of work. So signing up to be an apprentice, you are signing up for a full-time job and a full-time college experience in the realm of teaching that looks different than some of the other apprenticeships. So knowing what you're signing up for is super important. We've become a little more transparent in our expectations at the state level, and passing that down to our education preparation providers and districts so that the folks signing up for the program have a thorough understanding of what they're looking at. We've also done some survey and feedback sessions with our mentor teachers who are looking for more clearly defined roles and expectations. So it's really fun to have a statewide network of folks that we can go and see what everyone else is doing in that space, beg, borrow, and steal some handbooks and toolkits, and really make sure that folks know how the program is supposed to help and how they can be a part of that.
Great, great. Anyone else?
Yeah,
Ryan, who came up?
we had a partner, a post-bac partner, I believe, who's one of their paras, was a para for a long time at one of their charter schools, and she became an apprentice, and she, with the funding that we're able to provide them, we're able to provide workplace materials and workplace attire support funds. So she came in really happy, apparently, one day, excited to work, in tears because she was able to buy her first brand new pair of work shoes in years. Her work shoes had had holes in them for a long time. So being able to provide things like work shoes with those support funds is incredible. It's worth doing the work. It's one of those little things that we overthink and we overlook a lot of the times, but that one moment of joy and putting that spark in that future teacher to be in front of kids is incredible. So if that doesn't get you moving and motivated to invest in the program, I don't know what will. So
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. There is nothing like stories like that or going to an apprenticeship signing day when, you might have 22-year-olds surrounded by their parents, as they make a commitment to become a teacher, and you may have a 55-year-old surrounded by, their kids or even grandkids excited for, their parent or grandparent to become a teacher. It's the absolute best. Um, um, with that said, uh, I'm just curious. I'd also just recommend really quick if you can ever bring legislators to these things, to go to the classrooms, to do a signing day, to have a panel of apprentices. The apprentices will sell the need for funding for you. It's incredible when you hear their stories. Recognizing time, Kelly, I'm actually just going to turn it to you. Do you have any advice or closing thoughts? I always admire your work with MSEA and for the initial legislation that wasn't funded, but then you persevered. Any closing thoughts as people think to how to find funding in this space?
Sure. So, I mean, I think if, one takeaway I will say, like, seize the moment, because I'm very aware in Maryland, like any other governor, any other state superintendent, any other people in my office, any other people at MSCA, our teachers union, like, I don't think we'd be here. But I think we all realize, like, we have to seize the momentum. And so we decided as a collective that we were going to go for it. And so, like, if you see that the right people are in the positions that can make the movement happen, like, you got to go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Kelly. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't shout out Maryland, Massachusetts, and Arizona State apprenticeship agency partners. And then in Nebraska, their U.S. Office of Apprenticeship State, but they have great state partners at their Department of Labor as well. But it's awesome to see the partnerships. It's awesome to see your leadership taking advantage of this moment on behalf of ensuring that all kids get not only the teacher they need and deserve. Thank you all for attending today. Future webinars in the link, and y'all should come to our next annual convening in 2027 because you get to see it from these folks live and in person. And so this is the next best thing we could do, a webinar. But again, Claire, Ryan, Jessica, Grant, Kelly, thank you all so much for sharing your expertise and your leadership in your respective states. I hope everyone has a good rest of their day, and y'all take care, and thank you so much. Bye now.